I thought it would be coffee rings on spreadsheets and polite nods in hallways. It was a regular Tuesday, until my boss shut the door and said one sentence that made the office feel bigger than fluorescent lights and deadlines. If you've ever felt invisible at work, too seasoned to be shiny, too valuable to be noticed, this is for you. What he told me didn't just rearrange my afternoon. It rearranged how I saw myself, my years, and what love can look like after 50. Before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I'm genuinely curious if you're in a big place like Dallas or a quiet town with one diner and a lot of kind neighbors. All right, here's what happened. My name is Evelyn, and I'm 52. I work in operations at a mid-sized logistics company just outside Cincinnati, the kind of building made of mirrored glass that reflects the sky more beautifully than it reflects the people inside it. I used to like that, how the building looked glamorous from the outside, but on most days it felt like a trick. Inside were the usual things: the printer with its own personality, the coffee maker that groaned like an old dog, and a calendar pinned to my cubicle wall with pictures of lighthouses. The lighthouses were a gift from accounting. They said they matched my steady energy. My boss is Michael. He's 58, soft-spoken, with a careful way of listening that makes you say more than you planned. He came up through warehouse management, which means he still wears leather work boots to the office and keeps a small, beat-up tape measure in his desk for reality checks. People like him. They also tiptoe around him, because that's what happens with bosses. You keep the jokes gentle and the feedback gentler. I woke up that morning already rehearsing my to-do list. End of quarter reports. Carrier contract renewals. Fix the inventory delay from the Lexington hub. The sky had that October scrubbed blue look, crisp and almost too honest. I made my tea the way I like it. English breakfast, 2 minutes steeped, splash of milk, and I packed a turkey sandwich I knew I wouldn't be excited about by noon. On the drive-in, the radio played an old Eric Clapton song, and I tapped the steering wheel at the lights. I remember this because the song felt like a good sign for a regular day. By 10, the office had warmed into its noises. Phones with their brisk chirps, the thud of box lids from the sample room, someone laughing 2 cubes over about a meme I wouldn't see. I was building a spreadsheet with 100 tiny decisions hidden in it when Michael stopped by my desk. He didn't say anything at first, just drummed his knuckles lightly on the low wall and waited for my eyes to lift. "You've got a minute, Evelyn?" His voice does this quiet thing when he's asking a real question, not a performative one. "For you," I said, smiling. "I have many minutes. But the spreadsheet might get jealous." He laughed, but it was the kind that looks at the floor after. "End of the day? 5, if that works." My stomach tightened the way it does when you read the first line of a letter and you're suddenly afraid of the second. End of day could mean anything, but inside most companies it means doomsday or promotion day, and I felt too ordinary for either. I made a small joke about adding it to my calendar, and he nodded, appreciating the pretense that neither of us noticed the subtext. All day, little things kept choosing sides. The printer jammed. A carrier rep apologized too cheerfully. A younger colleague, Madison, breezed by in shoes that could not be walked in quietly. She tapped my desk. "You okay? You look thoughtful." "I have a 5 o'clock, I said. "Like the news." She grinned. "I swear you're the only grown-up here. You'll be fine." At lunch, I ate half the sandwich and spent the rest of the break looking out at the parking lot. I kept thinking about the last 2 years. Divorce finalized. Daughter moved to Denver with a promotion that made me beam and ache. The house that creaked like an old friend when I came home and did not ask how my day had gone. People think loneliness is loud, like a fire alarm, but mine was quiet and competent, almost courteous. It let me get everything done before it nipped at my heels. At 4:30, the light shifted. Our office faces west, so the late sun slides along the glass and turns the cubicles into movie sets. Everyone looks better at that hour. Even the staplers glow. I gathered my notes and smoothed my skirt, because that's what my mother taught me to do before important conversations. Press your hands on the fabric and find your breath in the small, practical motions. Michael's office smells like cedar from the little block he keeps by his monitor. There's a photo of a shipyard on the wall, all cranes and cables, and a framed drawing in crayon from some long-ago company picnic. A stick figure man with giant boots labeled Mr. M. I like his office. It's competent without being slick. He stood when I came in, then closed the door with slow hands. That's when my pulse quickened. He motioned to the chair across from his desk, and I sat, resting my folder on my lap like a shield I didn't want to admit I needed. "Evelyn," he began, then paused, and the pause was gentle, not dramatic. "I should start with the business, and then I want to say something personal, if that's all right." "Business sounds excellent," I said. "Let's keep HR proud." He smiled, crinkles at the eyes, a softness in the mouth, and nodded. "We're restructuring. Not the scary kind. The we grew faster than our system's kind. I've been thinking a lot about who keeps this whole thing moving without asking for applause." I waited. My hands did their little smoothing motion on the manila folder. "You do," he said. "You're the reason our messes turn into processes. I want you to lead operations while I step back from some of the day-to-day. In practice, that means more authority, more compensation, and, if you accept it, a team that reports to you directly. You'd report to me for a short transition, and then to the COO. Clean and transparent." I blinked at him. "I know," I said words, something like, "I don't know what to say," but they sounded far away, like I was speaking from the bottom of a pool. Then the practical part of me marched in with sensible shoes. "I can do that," I said, and my voice was steady. "I have been doing parts of that already." "You have," he said simply, "and I've been slow to name it." Something unclenched in my chest, a knot I hadn't realized I was carrying around, tied in the exact shape of the word finally. I opened my folder to hide the small tremble in my fingers. Inside were notes and color-coded tabs that looked almost comic in their readiness. "And the personal?" I asked, trying and failing to make it sound like a footnote. He took a breath. He didn't look away. "I want to be careful here," he said. "I don't want you to ever wonder if your job depends on how you handle this next part, because it doesn't. Nothing about your career should be entangled with what I'm about to say. You have my word." My shoulders lifted, barely, and settled. He'd found the exact words I needed, the ones that held the dignity of both of us. "I've been alone a long time," he said. "Longer than I realized. And lately I've noticed that the best part of my day is the 5 minutes when you're telling me something complicated with that calm you have. You have a way of making difficult things feel navigable. I don't know what the future looks like for you, but if you ever felt curious about a dinner, not a secret, not a power play, just two adults talking, I'd like to ask you to dinner. Not tonight, not tomorrow, at a time that respects the transition and your comfort. And if you'd rather we never mention this again, then we won't, and you'll still lead operations because you earned it." There it was. The sentence that changed everything wasn't just the invitation. It was the way he said it, without hurry, without the old careless assumption that a woman owes politeness for the sake of a man's bravery. He offered me a door without standing behind it with a stopwatch. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the shipyard photo, and thought about cables lifting heavy things that would break a person's back if they tried to carry them alone. I thought about my quiet house, about my daughter's voice on the phone on Sunday nights, about the way my hands have learned to fix small things, sticking drawers, squeaky hinges, because so many big things don't fix on command. I appreciate the way you asked, I said. That matters more than you might know. I held his gaze. And I appreciate the work, the trust. That matters too. It does, he said. I told him I needed time, not the dramatic kind, just the decent kind. I also told him that if I said yes to dinner, I'd want the arrangement at work to be beyond suspicion, with HR looped in and the reporting lines adjusted so that I wasn't answering to him directly. I didn't want whispers to cheapen what I do best, solve problems people don't see. I said all this without a tremor in my voice, and it turned out I liked hearing myself ask for the life I wanted to live. Then that's how we'll do it, he said. Clean and transparent. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen before, not the polite curve from meetings, but something warmer, relieved. Thank you for not running for the elevator. Only because your boots would beat me there, I said, and that made him laugh, truly laugh, which eased the pressure in the room like a window had been cracked. We walked out together, not side by side. He hung back a pace, a small, thoughtful courtesy that kept my steps my own. At my desk, I found a sticky note I'd written myself that morning. Remember, you've done hard things. I slid it into my bag like a souvenir from a place I'd just left. The building exhaled its 5 o'clock sigh. Chairs pushed back, the soft sip of backpacks, the little chorus of good night drifting over partitions. Outside, the air had the first bite of cold, that hint of winter you can taste on your tongue. The lot smelled faintly of wet leaves and diesel, and the sunset had decided to put on a show. Gold poured over the windshields and made even the cheapest cars look expensive. Michael paused at the curb. I'll email HR tonight, he said, and I'll send you a draft of the new role. You can mark it up. Don't be gentle. I'm not good at gentle margins, I said. Ask my spreadsheets. He grinned. Then he did something small and extraordinary. He put his hand over his heart and gave a nod, an old-fashioned gesture that felt like a promise. No drama, no flourish, just respect. On the drive home, the radio found another old song, one of those melodies that makes your bones hum with memory. I let the words float through me and thought about how many times in my life I'd said, "It's just a workday," in a tone that meant, "Don't expect much, Evelyn. Be grateful for the predictable. Keep your head down." Today, the same words felt different. It was just a workday, and inside it, there had been an invitation to stand where I already was and see that the ground held. My house greeted me with its familiar catalog of sounds. The heater hiccuped. The stairs acknowledged each foot. In the kitchen, I opened the window even though it was cold, just to bring the air inside. I made tea and held the warm cup with both hands, the way my grandmother did, like she was listening to it. I considered calling my sister, but I kept the story to myself for one evening, like cupping a candle where the draft can't find it. I sat at the kitchen table and wrote down the things I wanted from the new role. Clear metrics. A small team I could grow and mentor. Autonomy paired with accountability. I wanted to build something that would work whether or not I was there on a given day. I wrote down the words, "teach them how," and underlined them twice. I thought about Michael's careful pause before the personal part. How he had made room for my answer to be no without punishing me in any way. The tenderness of that still surprises me. It's not the flowers and chocolate tenderness of movies. It's the kind you learn in the second half of life, when you understand that people are not projects, and time is not a dare. Before bed, I stood at the window and watched the street. The neighbor across the way took his trash to the curb and waved, and I waved back, and the normalcy of that exchange grounded me. I brushed my teeth and told my reflection the truth, that I was scared, but not of losing my job. I was scared of hope. Hope asks you to hold yourself up to the light and say, "This is me, at this age, with these years. I am still allowed to want." I slept the honest sleep you get after a long day of telling yourself the truth. In the morning when I woke, the first thing I felt was a steady tap of certainty. I could lead operations. That part was clear. The second thing was a quieter tap. I could say yes to dinner if it was under the right sky, with the right boundaries, at the right time. If you're watching from Peoria or Portland, from a town you left and came back to, or a place you never planned to leave, you might know this feeling. The moment you realize your life is wider than you've been living it. Sometimes it arrives in a big flourish, a lottery ticket, a move across the country. Sometimes it arrives in a small office that smells like cedar, in the voice of a man who says, "I see what you've built here, and I won't ask you to shrink to fit my plans." That was my Tuesday. It didn't look like a miracle from the outside, but it changed the way the walls felt around me. And when I logged on the next morning, there was an email from HR with a draft of a new title, and an email from Michael with 2 lines at the bottom that made me smile. "No hurry. Your call. I'll be in the warehouse if you need me." I wrote back with my first set of edits, and after a pause long enough to be sure, a single sentence beneath them. "When the transition is official, I'd be open to dinner at Rosie's early, where the music isn't loud." Then I hit send and sat very still, listening to my heart behave itself. If you've made it this far, tell me your city below and tell me this. When was the last time someone surprised you by respecting you more than you expected? Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. When I woke the next morning, the light through my curtains felt different. It wasn't brighter or dimmer. It was steadier, like the day had arrived with a certain kind of purpose. I moved through my morning routine slower than usual, letting myself feel the weight of what had happened the day before. My boss, Michael, had given me both a new role and something I hadn't expected in years, an invitation to possibility. I brewed my tea and stood at the counter with both hands around the mug, staring out at the oak tree in my yard. The leaves were finally turning, shades of copper and red that reminded me how seasons change whether we ask them to or not. I thought about how my own seasons had shifted without much fanfare. Marriage ended, daughter grown, house quieter. And now here was a man, steady and careful, asking if I wanted to step into a different kind of season again. At work, I noticed myself differently. People came to my desk with questions, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was doing favors. I felt like I was practicing for the role Michael had set in front of me. My answers had more authority, my notes more structure. Madison popped by with a grin. "Boss lady energy today, Evelyn." I laughed, but the words lingered in a pleasant way. The HR draft of my new position came in by mid-morning. Clean lines, clear responsibilities, exactly the kind of document that makes my heart feel tidy. I printed it out, laid it flat on my desk, and began marking it up. There was something grounding in the act, like carving my own place in ink and margin notes. I caught myself smiling at the page, a smile that came not from flattery, but from recognition. I knew I could do this. At lunch, I sat in my car instead of the break room. The quiet of the parking lot gave me room to think about the personal part of Michael's words. His voice had carried no pressure, only respect. That mattered more than I could put into sentences. Respect is a rare currency, and I'd learned over years that you can't spend love without it. Later in the afternoon, he passed by my desk. He didn't stop or linger, just gave me the kind of nod that said, "I see you." That one look warmed me more than any bouquet of flowers ever could. By Friday, the transition had already started. A younger manager asked if she'd now report to me, and I told her honestly that things were still being worked out, but yes, eventually. She smiled with relief, like she trusted me more than she trusted the idea of change. That trust settled into my chest like a soft stone. That evening I went home, made dinner for one, and set an extra plate across the table as a kind of experiment. I wanted to see what it felt like to imagine someone there. Not a ghost of my past, not an echo of what I'd lost, but the presence of someone steady, real. The sight didn't hurt. It surprised me by feeling natural. The following week, Michael sent another email. Short, respectful. Transition looks smooth. When you're ready, I'd still like to take you to Rosie's. Early evening, quiet corner. I read the message 3 times. My first instinct was to wait, stall, protect, overthink. But then I heard my daughter's voice in my head, that laugh she has when she calls me cautious. She always says, "Mom, life's shorter than you think." So I wrote back, "Yes, Rosie's next Thursday. 7 works." My fingers trembled a little as I hit send, but afterward I felt a surprising calm, like stepping into water you've tested with your toes and finally trusting the depth. Thursday came with its own nerves. I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual, choosing a soft navy dress that felt both professional and personal. At Rosie's, the air smelled faintly of grilled steak and fresh bread. Michael was already at the table, standing when he saw me, smiling in that way he does. No show, no pretense, just a quiet warmth. The dinner wasn't fireworks. It was conversation. We talked about his grown sons, my daughter, the books we'd abandoned halfway through, the way the company had changed since the pandemic. We laughed at small stories. We